Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad to be with you on this Friday, November 11th, Veterans Day, from our studios here inside the safe and secure American Space Museum in downtown Titusville. We have a beautiful rocket launch of STS-5 behind us here, courtesy of Tom Usiak. Hey, Tom and brother Mark, they're on their way down here to the Space Coast to photograph the Artemis launch that's now scheduled for Wednesday. And yes, those of you that have been following us, Hurricane Nicole did her damage. A lot of ocean front damage over in the Atlantic Ocean, but our American Space Museum is just fine. We had a little structural damage to one of our signs out front, but most importantly, bone dry inside. All of our precious relics of the space age, nothing got damaged. Thanks to a lot of people helping us stay secure. Marty Winkle, hello Marty, my co-producer, cameraman. How you doing, Marty?
Doing good, Mark. How about you?
Good. That was kind of a windy, not a lot of rain. Thank God we didn't have, but boy, the wind was certainly strong. And all over the Space Coast, we have evidence of that. Power lines down, some intersections are messed up, but we survived just fine. We're very happy that we didn't have any leaking problems. And though we were off 2 days, we're glad, Marty and I, to bring you a Stay Curious program today on Veterans Day. And happy Veterans Day to all you veterans out there, including my friend and co-producer, Marty, proud Marine, hoorah. Marty, you were in the Vietnam conflict there. And I wasn't because I was in the next to the last draft. But Veterans Day today, we honor all who served us. We're going to feature a couple astronauts here. Couldn't get the computers up and running, so I don't have my notes in front of me like I usually do, or the printout of our video slideshow. So I'll do the best I can to remember what I wanted to share with you all today. But Veterans Day 2020, we hope 2022, hope you're all enjoying it. And I didn't print this out, Marty. I guess I'll need my glasses to see it. How many astronauts have been in the military branches of our armed forces? Well, I'm glad you asked that. Out of 330 American U.S. astronauts, 219 of them, almost 70%, come from the armed services. And the most are Air Force, Navy next, okay. And then you got the Marine Corps. That's the, what do you call that, Marty? The adult branch of the Navy? Is that what they call the Marines?
No, it's the men's department of the Navy.
Oh, there you go. Okay, men's department of the Navy. And hoorah for a lot of good Marines out there. We're going to see one or two here. U.S. Army has quite a few. All the way down to 2 U.S. Coast Guard astronauts there in our military branch. So well represented, all the armed services. And a few we're going to highlight. How about Alan Shepard, the first American in space, was Navy, and he was a Rear Admiral to boot. And I know in later life he loved wearing those Navy Rear Admiral whites around there. John Glenn was in the Marines in the Korean War. Actually, Marty, Alan Shepard was in World War II. And John Glenn was in the Marines, and he fought in the Korean War, flying those F-86 Sabre jets. Marty, you know who John Glenn's famous wingman was, don't you?
Was it Pete Conrad?
No.
It was an actor.
No. Hall of Fame baseball player.
Ted Williams.
Ted Williams. Can y'all believe it? Ted Williams, really the greatest ball player ever when you really look at his stats. Took 3 years out of his wonderful career to fly in the Korean War, and he was John Glenn's wingman there. If he could have had those 3 years, that was in his prime too, Marty. He'd have had another 100 home runs. And Ted Williams, not talked about enough in baseball annuals, in my opinion, but he was John Glenn's wingman there. in the Korean War. Neil Armstrong, many of us say, is the first civilian on the moon. No, he was not in a military branch when he walked on the moon, but he was in the Navy in the Korean conflict, and then he used that experience to go fly an X-15 space plane. Oh, let me get there. We got Guy Bluford there, the first African American in space. He was an Air Force colonel in the Vietnam War. And I got to throw a lady in there, and I'd love to meet this lady, Marty. Susan Helms is an Air Force general in the Air Force. She was actually over the Space Command, we call it now, at the 45th Space Wing. She was over that, a lieutenant general in the Air Force. Susan Helms, retired now. And that is Bruce Melnick, the first Coast Guard astronaut, and Burbank is the second Coast Guard astronaut. Bruce, I just talked to Bruce on the phone today. He's the astronaut du jour. Well, he lines up all the astronauts out there at the Space Center, and I had some business to talk to him about, and so he doesn't know I'm shooting his picture up there. A young Bruce Melnick when he was Coast Guard commander. Marty Melnick is a very experienced helicopter pilot. He was a test pilot for a lot of those Coast Guard helicopters being used to save people during this Hurricane Nicole. So there's 6 good ones for you, military astronauts. And Marty, you might say, the Army? Don't have the Army up there. No, I don't. We'll put 3 current Army astronauts up there. Frank Rubio is on left, and McLean on the right, and who's the other one there? I didn't write that down, embarrassingly enough. You see what his name says there, Marty?
No.
I can't tell on that on my notes. Rubio hasn't flown. The other astronaut has, whose name I forgot. Like I said, I don't have my notes in front of me here. Doggone it. I do have notes that 2 Navy SEALs have flown to space, Bill Shepard and Chris Cassidy. So I'm embarrassed. I can't think of the other astronaut there. He's been on the space on several expeditions. And Marty, look over there on my notes there. On the did you see his name on my? Scroll that down on the right, the screen on the right there. My scroll to the right there. Be towards the bottom. Anyway, the Army's well represented as astronauts. Anne McLean there could be the first woman to walk on the moon. Rubio, he's due to fly on expedition. And at the bottom, it would say, I guess you don't see it there. Sorry to miss that Army guy there, but we'll make up to it later. Don't see it there?
No, not yet.
Be right at the very bottom of my copy. And McLean, Frank Rubio, and
Shepard Glenn. I think I'm getting there.
at the top.
Andrew Morgan.
Andrew Morgan, that is. And thank you, Marty. Andrew Morgan is the astronaut on the right. And he's spent about a half a year in space already and did 7 spacewalks, I think he's done, the most of any expedition astronaut. So thank you, Mr. Morgan. Thank you, Marty, for looking that up. And we do thank you, veterans out there, for your service to our great country, and made greater still by our astronauts that are willing to sacrifice it all to push the envelope of space exploration. So, well, on this date in 1966, November 11th, the last of the 10 two-man Gemini spacecraft took off on this sports car of the rocket access to space. They love calling it a sports car feel. The Titan II rocket with the Gemini spacecraft on top had Jim Lovell and Buzz Aldrin on there. This was the last mission. A lot of things had to go right, including the spacesuit that Buzz Aldrin, for the first time, trained in an aquatic water tank to practice things he had to do in the EVA. EVA, extravehicular activity spacewalks, were very difficult to do. NASA overestimated or underestimated how astronauts need to grab things to stabilize themselves. So they put some footholds, more handrails around the Gemini spacecraft for uh, Buzz Aldrin to give it a good workout. And then Jim Lovell, his job was to rendezvous and dock like he was in moon orbit with the target vehicle, the Agena rocket, that was launched 90 minutes before this launch at 4:46 p.m. on November 11th, 1966. There on the left is, of course, Buzz Aldrin and Jim Lovell, giving you an idea how small this vehicle is. They're standing up in it. And when you sat down and closed those gull wings with that hatch, odd shaped window looking out, triangular shaped window, so to speak, you were right there. Your head was just inches above that door. Lovell's 94 years old and Buzz is 92 years old, Marty. Two of the oldest living astronauts. Actually, the oldest living astronaut by a couple months at age 94 is Frank Borman. And Borman and Lovell spent 2 weeks inside of this Gemini spacecraft without even opening the windows, the doors. Amazing. But when Buzz did, he did 2 stand-up EVAs and 1 tethered EVA. And here's a picture of him that he took of himself with a Nikon camera, the first space selfie. This is credited with being, that's Buzz turning a 35 millimeter Nikon on himself. What possessed him to do that, Marty? I don't know. He's sort of a humble guy that you don't think he'd be doing that, but he did. We didn't take selfies at all in the film days because that wasted a frame of film and you had 24 exposures in your camera. But here's a picture a beautiful picture that Lovell took of Buzz out getting ready to do his EVA. The Earth in the background. You can just see the docking pole on the Agena rocket there behind Buzz. 4-day mission. They accomplished all the goals. It was really important to work on the spacesuit that would be used on the moon, that ironically Buzz Aldrin would be wearing 3 years later when walking on the moon. Less than 3 years later. Imagine that. Buzz is in space orbiting the Earth, and then he's walking on the moon with Neil Armstrong. So GT12, we like using the Roman numerals, is the way NASA did it. They called it Gemini, like Gemini cricket. And Gemini is the constellation, which is rising in the east about this time of year. So we love pointing out that our museum was founded by honoring the Apollo, Mercury, and Gemini astronauts at Spaceview Park. And here is the iconic 2 image of the Gemini program. The paver for Gemini 12 is there at the bottom at Spaceview Park, just a couple blocks away from our museum, and a beautiful place to see where we've got astronaut handprints in bronze, and those that weren't that we didn't get the handprints before they passed away. We've got different reliefs of them there. There are the pylons that got finished very recently that stretch out. The Gemini astronauts all have their handprints there. So we've got Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and a couple of them, Lovell, Borman, in several places. We also have them in our Apollo gallery. There's Jim Lovell's handprints there, and there's Buzz Aldrin's on there. So it's fun to put their handprints on there. A lot of people comment they're small compared to your own handprints. A few of them, like Wally Schirra and Alan Shepard, fit mine really good. But most of the astronaut handprints are smaller than mine, and I'm just an average Joe Schmo out there. So GT12, Gemini Titan 12, a wonderful mission that we celebrate on this Veterans Day today. And we look at this beautiful, iconic picture that Tom Usiak took of Columbia on the pad for its 5th return to space. And that happened on November 11th. 1980. I guess that'd have been 83. Let me consult the scroll since I don't have my notes with me. Or 82, actually. We did 5 missions of Columbia from April 81 to November 82. And then STS-6 was Challenger's first flight. So Vance Brand was the commander, Bob Overmeyer. There's the launch. Tom Usiak and his crew took this. Steve Nolte built the equipment for them to do this remote. By the way, that beautiful picture there is another Tom Usiak picture that we used for our Shuttle Fest inaugural event in April. And we're planning our Shuttle Fest 2 already for April 16th, 2023. There's the beautiful launch. Here is the crew, seen at a press conference there. That is Vance Brand on the right in a suit there. He was the pilot of the Apollo-Soyuz spacecraft handshake with the Russians. Bob Overmeyer's got the flat top there. Bill Lenore, his one and only flight. Both Overmeyer and Lenore have passed away. And Joseph Allen on his first of 2 space flights. And he famously did a untethered spacewalk, Joe Allen did there. And then wrote one of the first books about spacewalking there. So really a cool crew. Their job was what the shuttle was intended to do, deliver some satellites to space for pay. And that was the mantra of, we are your space truck. Forget your single stick rockets. Everyone's going to want to put their communication satellites and spy satellites and whatever on a space shuttle. Well, we know that lasted 25 missions until the explosion of Challenger, and that whole a lot of people backed out of their commitments there. Private industry did. But the idea, as Marty well knows, because he worked on the shuttle program and the launch processing services as a manager of people working on those rocket engines, the SSMEs. But Marty, as you well know, this is and if you could point it out for me, the PAM. The idea to get a lot of these satellites up to 500 miles or 22,000 miles, where the geosynchronous was, to put a little rocket on the bottom, solid rocket that would ignite, and then put it up there to its desired distance there. And that's what the PAM is, the little nozzle with the solid rocket is right there, Marty. A great idea. You've got these little canisters that they were taken to space in and opened up. The shuttle would get away from it. They would ignite that solid rocket booster and it would put it in orbit where it wanted. Well, not all those PAMs worked. Some of them got stranded in Earth orbit. We went up with a couple shuttle missions, rescued them, brought them back to Earth, put a new PAM motor on it. One time, I think they put a new PAM motor on one in the payload bay and fired it off. So a very important part of development of the shuttle was these motors that were going to get the excuse me for yawning there. Those motors that were going to get the payload from 200 miles to 22,000 miles in geosynchronous orbit. And here is the crew in space there. Vance Brand, what a nice guy. I met him a couple times, a good friend of our museum. Vance is 91 or 2 years old. And Ace Moving Company, we deliver satellite development deployment by Ace Moving Company. And this was a big deal to kind of tease companies into, we just successfully did this. So, put your satellite on our space shuttle. And it was just found to be too complicated and unreliable after the Challenger accident there. So, Marty, we've had these great 2 missions today on Veterans Day. And this was speaking of the last mission of the Gemini program in 1966, and then this in 1982, the operational mission of the space shuttle. Well, they said that it was operational, Marty. I was looking for a picture of it launching there. After 4 missions, they took out They had only had 2 astronauts the first 4 missions. This was the largest crew America put to space, or anybody at the time, 4 human beings. And they deemed the shuttle to be, quote, not a test vehicle anymore, but operational. Well, after every mission literally had some rewrites of procedures and so forth, not every mission, but a lot of them, as this beast was being tamed. After the Columbia accident and the 113th shuttle flight, this was the 5th one they deemed operational. After the 113th shuttle flight that we lost, the review board of the Columbia investigation said that basically this has never been operational. It is an experimental spacecraft until the end of its program. So they kind of took that, the last missions of the shuttle from the 113th mission, which was STS-105, to 135, the next 22 missions were basically thought of as still experimental missions. After all, we didn't get comfortable with aviation and airlines, until they did thousands of flights. All right. And here the shuttle never even did more than 150 flights. A lot of, like I said, things being reworked all the time for safety and efficiency. So thought that was kind of interesting to point out that they backtracked and said that the shuttle, in a sense, was never truly an operational vehicle. It was always experimental. Marty, who have we got out there to say hi to today?
Well, we have Doug Forrest and Dave Stengy, William Whiting, and Mark and Tom Usiak.
All right. Our usuals out there. Thank you guys for watching today. And ladies out there, we know some people are off work and maybe doing a lot of things here on the Space Coast to clean up. There is a lot of cleanup. Not as many palm leaves down because that last hurricane we had kind of shook them all down. But yeah, we've got some cleanup to do around here, and in a full weekend ahead. The museum was closed today, but we will be open Friday, regular hours, if you're around the area vacationing. And then we'll get back to a big week next week, Marty, where we're going to have the police department come in on Tuesday. They were going to be here today, but I told them no need to come in. But today they're going to talk about the traffic flow and so forth for Artemis. On Tuesday. The launch is now scheduled for Wednesday. There are our launch facilities here are A-OK, everybody. There's our shuttle fueling station there. No problems in our museum. We're so grateful for that. And there is a masterpiece by Chris Calley. Go to CalleySpaceArt.com, and you may own this picture with Mark Usiak's photo in there. And we posted that up there to remind everybody the Artemis launch is now scheduled for after 1 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. I think it's 1:04, Marty. You got that in front? 1:04 is the 17th Eastern Standard Time. It's a 2-hour launch window. I got a good feeling we're going to get it off this time around. We don't know what Hurricane Nicole did out there to it. They're saying they think everything's going to be okay. Have you heard anything about it, Marty, that you want to share with our friends?
No, I haven't heard anything at all. But Connie McDaniel and Gary Gerald is watching also.
All right. Thank you, Ty, and Gary Gerald there. Gary, peanut farmer up there in South Carolina, I'll bet they got some heavy rain up there. I was watching the football game in Charlotte last night, and it rained through the whole ball game there. So, but yes, we've got the Artemis coming up. Tuesday, we'll have the police department give us an update of traffic patterns. Wednesday, we're going to have Mikey Haddad in here with a payload of the shuttles of November. And got Hugh Harris coming in on Friday, Marty, to also talk about shuttles of November. So 16 shuttles of November, and we'll be talking about them the rest of the month there, as that is one of the busiest launch months of the shuttle era November, having 16 orbiters safely launched to space. So, Marty, we thank everybody for watching. And on this Veteran Day, if you're a Veteran Day, thank you for the service to our country. If you're not, please thank a veteran out there. Marty, did you get your free meal somewhere today yet?
No, work in the yard all day.
Well, I know there's plenty of people out there that want to buy you, an ex-Marine, a delicious meal. So I hope you take advantage of that, Marty. So we hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. We have had a busy one here with the hurricane and so forth, but everything's safe and secure here on the Space Coast. And we're glad that you tuned into us on Veterans Day. And on behalf of Marty and our museum here, we thank all of you veterans out there, seriously, for doing what you have to make us the greatest country on the face of the earth. And the second thing that's made us the greatest country is our wonderful, awesome space program. So on behalf of the museum, I'm Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.